Hi everyone, welcome to a new Sensibility edition. In this month's newsletter, we are looking at the subject of overcoming traumatic experience. I'm delighted to introduce to you my interviewee today, Lisa Hueske. She is a Feldenkrais practitioner and a dancer with a background in ballet. Who qualified as a Feldenkrais practitioner in 2008. She also has been on a journey herself in terms of what movement has meant to her in her life. And some of that comes from going through her own traumatic experience with injury. And we'll go into that in more detail as we go along. But I was particularly keen to talk to Lisa because I've found, when I had heard her story before, it to be quite inspirational. Welcome, Lisa. It's great to have you here.
Hey there. Thank you for having me. I'm quite honored.
Great. Just to help you and to make you aware, this is going out in our Sensibility newsletter, which is a monthly publication, and that will be available on YouTube. So anyone that's watching on YouTube, please hit the like and subscribe button. So now that's out of the way, Lisa, I don't know if you wanted just to kind of give a more general introduction to yourself than I just did, or a little bit more information, just to kind of help people, put together the conversation a bit more.
Exactly. Great. Thank you. So I would more consider myself being a modern/contemporary dancer. And that's more so my passion and my professional world as an artist. I teach ballet as well for a living. I teach children, and so I keep the level of ballet still at. I trained heavily in ballet up until college, and then my my studies at University of Texas in Austin, was to deepen my studies in modern and contemporary dance. And I teach ballet at a younger level so that I don't have to get in too much of the rigor of how ballet can be as an instructor. And I'll still take ballet occasionally here and there as part of my training. But again, I'd like to clarify that just because there's quite the difference as far as the approach to movement. I'd like to mention that I've been doing Feldenkrais since I was in college, since I was 19. And I was a student of the work for about 6 years before I decided to enter a training. And my training was with Dr. Larry Goldfarb in New York City. And the training started in 2005 and we finished in 2008. And so I've been a practitioner for quite some time now. I guess that's
15 years.
Yeah. And so 15 years plus 6 years is like 21 years of like Feldenkrais as being my bread and butter of how I still like approach how to take care of myself and how to take others, and how I see how I can improve my life and others people's lives. So I feel really grateful it's been in my life for this long to keep me going.
Yeah. And so just to clarify that, you teach dance in those ways, but you also teach Feldenkrais and have private practice in Feldenkrais, seeing one-to-one clients and things like that, as well as.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. So just to clarify
yes.
for everyone. So when we've spoken, before this, you've mentioned that during that period when you were 19 and were training in dance, that you went through a process at that point in your life where Feldenkrais became an appropriate way for you to work with your own movement and physical abilities. So I don't know if you want to just sort of go into that in some way, just to help set the scene.
So at a college level of training in dance in a professional training situation, dance is pretty much 8 hours a day. It's lots of dancing. And it came to a place where I was subsidizing with other classes of movement to try to cross train in Pilates. Our teachers usually, one of my teachers was pretty big about teaching yoga,
Hmm.
and another maybe approach was like kind of a general somatic, or kind of like we are trying bits and pieces of things.
Mm.
And I came across a little bit of Feldenkrais there, and it that was something I knew of another teacher in town, that taught the work through another dance person in the community, because I became injured. I had a stress fracture in my right tibia, and it was
Okay.
huge. It was like, I mean, it took up a lot of my, like, in the x-ray, like it went over half of my leg. And
So
so
just for
that injury,
or just
yeah,
for
that
context, the
injury,
tibia
yeah, yeah,
is the shin bone. So for
the
people that
shin
don't,
bone.
yeah, the shin bone. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it was a pretty big injury where it was like every step was just like tremendous pain. And I dance is so high impact. And so I had to stop dancing. And I was trying to do a lot of stretching, a lot of, I don't know, cross conditioning, within the resources of the university. Pilates is a pretty, I think that was a not well known form outside of the dance world, or outside of, mm, kind of more, maybe even elite education,
Hmm.
because it is costly.
Yeah.
But that still wasn't healing. I was even doing actually physical therapy.
Hmm.
And after a lot of frustration and just like immense pain, I, this person guided me to Feldenkrais, and I just got one. I literally just like showed up, didn't even contact the teacher, got on the floor, and I was like, what is this? Like, I'm not straining. This is like the most gentle way of moving I've ever treated myself to.
Hmm.
I mean, even laying in bed, I just feel like that was like a stressful thing for me. Like
Hmm.
going to bed and waking up, and like it was just like pain and like stress all the time. And that,
Yeah.
like, to move in this way that decreased like pain, or not even just pain. There was just like, uh, a tonus of my body. I immediately was like, what? This is weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
How did that work?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was that first class that like I came back and back like over and over and over, because there was something about the brain that
Mm-hmm.
I was like, there's something about the brain that I never approached movement with before. And so I was hooked. I did Feldenkrais every day. Like I did 2 classes a week, and then I would get on my own on the floor to continue those lessons, because those lessons were just so interesting to me that I thought like I could keep learning. And plus it was the only way I could move that didn't hurt.
Okay.
And so I did all of my technique classes like in an independent kind of study sort of way.
Yeah.
I felt really grateful, because my professors just left me alone and knew that I had this like determination to heal,
Yeah.
with this work
Yeah.
that wasn't, necessarily the program that I was supposed to be doing with a BFA.
For sure.
Um,
Yeah. So,
yeah,
so
and so
I mean, just on that point, it's like,
yeah,
that injury kind of introduced a different trajectory. So, we're talking about overcoming traumatic experiences, and it's quite reasonable to say that a stress fracture is traumatic, and in some way you found Feldenkrais as a useful route to working with that um, difficulty, or challenge in yourself, let's say. um,
exactly.
and
Yes,
and it was a contrasting experience from the things that you knew about before, or the ways that you had trained before. So just to kind of highlight that, that there was some difference there.
exactly. Yes, the ideas that I had all before probably kind of put me into this narrow way of how I knew about myself,
Mm.
to where like eventually things broke down because my training was so rigorous and so like, um I put myself there, this is the way I was taking information. I didn't know
Yeah.
that there's many ways of doing things, right?
Yeah.
And I just knew, okay, I'll do it the way that I've always known, whether it's with like a lot of muscular effort,
Yeah.
a lot of like over stabilizing to
Mm.
where I'm
Yeah.
holding things in a stressful way that like eventually like something else started feeling a lot of pain.
Yeah.
Um, or, the brunt of all of my work started happening to where like I was, you know, holding my calf muscles in certain ways that was just starting to pull away from my bone, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so that um, was for me to be injured in the first place. Like I had been injured one time before that, but
Mhm.
this was the biggest injury I'd experienced. And so
Yeah.
from dance, and so like my world was just like blown open because
Yeah.
actually I called it my dance world collapsed on me, and so
Right.
I rebuilt,
Yeah.
and I rebuilt through this idea of like, okay, movement. How do I reframe movement within me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And so at the end of that process, do you felt that you had become a different dancer?
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I had to um, learn how to know when to say no. I mean, it was interesting because I started getting my power back. Like
Hmm.
when I was rebuilding
Yeah.
this idea of like, regaining your own authority, like
Yeah.
that that's I learned that in Feldenkrais was
Mm.
gaining your authority again. And
Yeah.
I learned how to say no to things, or I just learned how to be like, okay, if I do that, I started understanding like, okay, I might not feel like I would hurt myself again if I did these things.
Mm.
Because that was when I was repatterning, but now um, I feel like I'm in a different place because I'm not so hurt anymore. But like during that process of healing,
Mm.
where un- I was able to understand myself what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do.
For
And
sure.
that's a hard thing to do in the dance world because it's like
Yeah, I was gonna
usually
say.
there's this
Yeah.
power sort of thing that you do what the choreographer asks you
Yeah.
to do, or the director, and you can't say no.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah,
so
I mean, just two things on that. One is that you mentioned authority there, and you just basically said it, but I was just going to again highlight that that sense of authority that you came out of that process with may not have been there as a dancer before you had that injury. You know, like that there was
exactly.
something transformative that made you, I don't know, more connected to yourself after the event through the process of Feldenkrais. Um, the other thing is that that quality of over efforting or overworking that I guess is very common in the ballet world um, is also very common outside of the ballet world, you know,
Oh yeah.
and it's something that we've kind of all um, not been educated about, that we've been taught in a way that this is how you get to where you want to go by working as hard as you can and making as much effort as possible. And in some way, the Feldenkrais method provides something a counter opinion to that. Don't it?
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. Yes. I that is cultural. It is like, it is a strategy.
Mm,
It's one strategy that can work for a while.
mm, yeah.
I mean, there's so many things accomplished that way, but it's not. If that's the only way to do it, I don't know. It doesn't. It seems like that's limiting.
Yeah.
That can actually limit the way you can operate. Because I don't know. I think we know that like burnout is a big thing, and
Yeah. Yeah.
breakdown's a big thing.
Yeah.
Um,
An injury in the context of dance.
injury.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so that kind of hopefully covers that period of your life. And then at a certain point, and I don't remember the full context, but there was something else that happened in your life that was an even bigger impact. So I mean, I can sort of introduce that subject. Lisa had an accident where a tree fell on her, and that caused a number of bone breakages, and also a massive change in her quality of life and her ability to live. And so I don't know if you'd want to go into detail about, exactly what was broken or what exactly happened. But I mean, suffice to say, there was something that happened that was such a big trauma that, took you out of a normal way of you experiencing yourself into a new place. So I don't know if you'd want to add anything to that.
Yes, and so I just the context of like the tree falling, I was on a beach.
Yeah.
I was on a beach in like Paradise. It's a well-visited island in the Philippines. I happened to be in the Philippines right after college. I was there to explore my parents' roots.
Yeah.
I'm from Houston. I was born and raised in Houston. So after school, I was like, okay, people go on their Europe backpacking trip or whatever. And I wanted to go dance um, in the Filipino or the Philippine National Folk Dance Company there.
Yeah.
And I had learned some of the dances growing up through my parents, like Filipino
Mhm.
associations. And so some people from the Philippines were here and they had studied and danced in the Philippines growing up. That's part of their education there. And also, there's a company that some of these people had spent time dancing for. And so
Okay.
I came from those people training me to I had some background to go there and dance, and so I was super excited to just like go deeper into the work
Yeah.
or into the more professional world of dance, folk dance. But there was some clashes there because I was American and I wanted to work harder, and so I did that for maybe a good 3 months
Mhm.
of attending rehearsals and performing, and I danced for the president over there. It's pretty
Oh wow. Okay.
nerve-wracking.
Yeah, I bet.
um
Yeah.
yeah, and then like I let that go and I started because I'm actually really into nature and I
Mhm.
wanted to go scuba diving, and I got scuba diving certified because it's super cheap to do it over there
Yeah.
and it's so beautiful, and I made friends with the scuba diving kind of community
Community.
there.
Yeah.
And so they took me out to an island for New Year's. So it was a New Year's celebration to go to this paradise island. And this coconut tree had no leaves on it. We all kept looking at it, and sunset was happening. And during sunset, big old crack.
Gosh.
Just then I looked, and I actually was the only one. Somebody said this. I was the only one that even like reacted to try to get
Mm.
away from the tree. I
Mm.
started moving. Nobody was moving. Everybody was just watching it. I moved, but unfortunately, I think I moved the wrong direction, or I don't know.
Yeah.
And that tree fell and crushed the entire left side of my body. And it fell pretty much more so the most on my shoulder, but it did hit my head a little bit.
Mm.
And so it was on the left side of my whole body where my shoulder blade was multiple fractured and had 8 broken ribs.
Yeah.
Luckily, my lungs were okay. There was no punctures into my lungs, and also, but immediately I started feeling some tremendous pain in my arm.
Yeah.
It was numb right away, prickly, 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 lightning,
Mm.
jabbing, and nobody could touch my arm. I was just kind of screaming already, like, don't touch my arm. And unfortunately, it was, a third world country. I had to do a speedboat ride off of this island. Um, and then a 2.5 hour dirt road in a tin box kind of ambulance where that was when the pain started coming, where I was like, okay, the shock is gone. All the bouncing on this hard, like no suspension whatsoever in this,
Yeah.
third world country ambulance on
Yeah.
this dirt road. And that was when I was like, okay, I'm feeling my bones. They're really messed up.
Yeah.
And eventually I got overnighted okay. So I stayed like I didn't lose any like heart function or anything like that. So the
Mm.
next morning they flew me to Manila, and there's great care in Manila. I mean, there's actually international doctors there that were doing residencies and stuff like that there. So They
Yeah.
actually spoke to me in Tagalog, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, you know more Tagalog than I do." I was like, "I speak English. Don't speak to me in Tagalog." Because I saw Caucasian people. I was like, "Wow," and they're speaking Tagalog.
Mm.
That's the Philippine national language of the Philippines,
Right.
and it was so
Yeah.
funny. I was in this like painful, weird world. Like I'm looking around, like, why am I in the Philippines still? Because I see
Mm.
white people around me.
Mm.
But yeah, and that um, you know, from that accident, my arm, I've been living with a disability. My arm was paralyzed for 2.5 years. I
Okay.
couldn't raise my arm. I
Mm.
couldn't. Um, yeah, there was a whole lot of like swinging my arm around just to like see if I can like touch something, or if I could, um, if I had to really move it, I had to use my other arm
Got you.
um, to move, just to feel any kind of mobility at that point. So
Yeah.
um, this
So
was a major, major injury that, like,
yeah.
wow, okay, and now I have to deal with this. But just the very first thing, though,
Yeah.
I want to talk about is because of my practice that I had built
Mm.
from the injuries from dance, I was able to begin this one lesson already in my bed, in the hospital bed, where I started doing the welding lesson. Do you
Hmm.
know that lesson?
Is it
Welding
building
by
your blood?
breathing,
Yeah.
welding by breathing,
Mm-hmm.
because I knew that I needed to start just at least bringing in my image of the sensations of what's going on in my ribs,
Hmm.
because my ribs were obviously damaged.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to feel them more and understand them, bringing them into like how what's how can I move them
Yeah.
without making them hurt more,
Yeah.
or how can I move them in just different directions. And I was in the hospital bed for like, that was already like day 2,
Yeah.
like
And
after
that
the
and that
accident.
was painful to do? Was that
No,
pain?
it was weird. It was not painful to do that
Okay.
because I knew I can move in these microwave ways
Without
that
triggering. Yeah.
without triggering like the sharp
Mm.
pain, or
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if anybody's experienced a bone break, but
Mm.
it's sharp, very sharp pain.
Yeah.
And so I was finding just possibilities like, can I go forward? Can I go a little bit this way or this way?
Mm.
I was just going around with my breath, just a
Mm.
gentle inhale, and then feeling how when I receded, like, okay, so I can actually go in this like little sort of movement in these few ribs right here, because there's like all of them basically broken. And
Yeah.
then the weirdest thing happened.
Hmm.
I sneezed. It
Okay.
was so painful. Like I was doing this, and then I sneezed, and I was like, oh, and I was like, and then I heard a pop, and then like something went back into place, and then I was able to breathe deeper. It
Oh
was
wow.
just
Okay.
insane.
Okay.
I was like, hold on, everyone. Nobody's in the room with me. And I was like, oh, that didn't cause like more injury or
Yeah,
something.
for sure.
And I
Yeah.
think I
Like
think
the
that was
body
my
trying to make
nervous.
sense. Yeah,
It
yeah.
was my nervous system that just was like,
Mhm.
that that's gonna happen. I mean, this was me exploring, and then my brain did something on its own to
Yeah. Yeah.
continue whatever I was doing. That's my theory. I don't know.
Well, I mean,
When you're in that place, yeah.
yeah, for sure. I mean, there's just two things I want to highlight is that, you can't have surgery on your ribs if you've broken them. Or I don't know if that's possible if it's a very serious, but most people don't have surgery, so they leave them to heal naturally. And in some way, what you were doing was, or it triggered some more primitive or base mechanism in your body. So the sneeze is something that is autonomic, with not something we're in control of. And in some way that helped organize. So yeah, I like the thread there, that you can help get back to that more organic mechanism through doing
Yes.
these movements. Yeah.
Yes. I find it like that happens. Um, I those sort of things for me, I start allowing more in my system,
Mm.
kind of more as an understanding it a little bit more. It's like, okay, I'm exploring here, I'm exploring here, and then like I kind of let something take over.
Yeah.
Weird. It feels kind of out of body-ish thing, but I know it's my body doing something that's not me, not this part of my brain or whatever, telling it what my body to do.
Yeah.
There's something that takes up the it's the autonomic system, I think.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, and it's
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, thanks, that was nice, it feels much better now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that does, I'm able to recognize that a little bit more so than
Mm.
earlier because of this long practice.
No, but it's
um
interesting because you obviously started that process straight away, like
yeah,
straight at the point of injury. And as we talked earlier, you said that, if you hadn't have had that background, maybe your outcome is very different. But you mentioned that you were paralyzed for 2 years. Um, at, can you track the point that the movement came back in your left arm? Or
yes.
was, like what happened in that process to get to that point?
So that's really a great question. I had um so I had to let my bones mend before I like flew back. And so the moment like my bones are mended, which is probably it's like 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, it was still painful to get on a plane and sit on a plane for a long time so
Hmm.
far. I because I was mended, I was able to I immediately just like got on the floor several hours a day
Yeah.
because I had this repertoire already, even though I wasn't even a teacher at all at that
Hmm.
point, but because I had built this repertoire and also just like this playfulness of of enjoying so many ways to move
Hmm.
that I became like this explorer.
Mm.
I was already an explorer, but I felt like now I'm a deep sea explorer because sensations are just so interesting at that point. Like, gosh, I can't feel my arm. So where it just like was so hard on my brain, but it's so fun at the same time,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I was so interested in possibilities, even if they're just micro, like even if I felt like maybe I wasn't doing anything, but then I still like there's something.
Mm.
This whole determination of seeking and of of
Yeah.
recovery. And
So,
so
no,
I
please go ahead.
yeah, I got on the floor um to be able to look at what I had going on and
Hmm.
kind of accept it. There's my limitations. Okay, like these are my limitations. I kept looking at them, but it's just like how can I what else? There's the rest of my body. The whole rest of my body can support this limitation. And
Hmm.
that was actually all I'm so glad I had this Feldenkraisian perspective of like there's still all of you that organizes to move this arm,
Yeah.
moves this shoulder, move
Mm.
these ribs that have been damaged, And
Mm.
so how can I keep expanding this universe of my brokenness in a way that's like um that can help regrow nerves or whatever, wake up nerves again. And
Mm.
so I think I literally like decided to like I moved in with my parents right after that accident. And then I was like, within 6 weeks, I moved out of my parents' house because I was like, I'm ready for more. I moved back to Austin to, by the way, yeah, I'm in Austin, Texas. I
Mm.
moved back to Austin because those were my teachers were there. I want to say Cynthia Allison is like my Feldenkrais mom. And
Mm.
she was my teacher throughout this whole thing. And also Matt Williams became another teacher in my studies before training.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I realized like, okay, I need FI, I need functional integration all the time, once a week. And
Hmm.
I just kind of resumed my classes. I kept taking the 2 classes a week. And then much more on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And so eventually I would think, so it took 2.5 years to really finally regain strength in my arm to
Mm-hmm.
where I can bear weight. But I feel like I was able to like raise my arm like probably maybe month 10.
Okay.
But it was like, you know, it was like, okay, can I get it
Yeah.
was a
It
pretty
wasn't
like,
skillful. Yeah.
it was like flinging it up there at that point. But I
Mm.
got up there and I was like, okay, I don't have any control now. But I mean, then about 2.5 years, like I was able through dance, through a lot of like, more like intelligent strengthening
Mm-hmm.
things from my own exploration and still combining it with a lot of Feldenkrais to
Yeah.
finally like, okay, now I can bear weight. I was doing handstands already.
Wow.
Well,
What
me,
month did you say?
I after 2.5 years, I was able to do
Okay.
handstands again. It was kind of
Right.
nuts.
Yeah, that
Um,
makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, handstands like dancing handstands. Not,
Cool.
I'm not
Yeah.
like a gymnast that
Not
I can hold because
calisthenics. Yeah.
I'm kind of still afraid of being upside down just because I'm not that skilled in being upside down. We
Yeah.
call that being upside down in dance.
Mm.
But gosh, with a whole lot of determination and
Yeah.
exploration, I was able to bring that arm back. And my practitioners that did hands-on work for me.
Mm.
The functional integration work was super important to help me see those blind spots and to keep,
Mm.
gosh, I think touch is just one of the most important things
Yeah. So
when we go through
again,
trauma.
just for context, functional integration is the one-to-one element of the Feldenkrais method, and Feldenkrais practitioners can help people by using touch and by guiding other people to find new ways of moving in themselves through touch. So that's what Lisa's talking about. And yeah, I like that you're raising that point that touch is a key ingredient to overcoming traumatic experience. I think that that is an underrated statement. So I'm really glad that
Yeah.
you brought that up. Um,
Yeah.
in some of the things that you said, there's a couple of things that stand out to me. One is that determination, obviously, and I don't know if that's something that you've had in you through your whole life, or you I don't know. I mean, many people in that situation would despair, would feel the weight of the change of their ability to live as something that's insurmountable. I can't recover from this. um so just to highlight that that wasn't something that occurred to you, or that there was just this determination that was there from the beginning of this process. And what you say about how you approached it, it wasn't determination in a I'm going to overwork and I'm going to overcome and I'm going to use my willpower to beat this thing. It was I'm interested in it and I'm curious and I want to understand it and I want to play with it and I want to explore all of the ways that I experience myself in this new form. And I think that those are really, really interesting approaches to life. So, just to highlight that and be like, that's I think something worth talking about, like how it's possible to get to that. And if you've got any advice for people that are perhaps going through traumatic experience to help them maybe find some of those qualities in their own journeys with difficulty.
Um, yeah, that's great. The one of the hardest things to do is to not judge or react or be um, to not listen to the loudest signal. Okay, so the loudest signal is usually the pain, right?
Mm.
And man, I sure went into despair. There's plenty of depression in there.
Mm,
But it wasn't ever the loudest signal for a long time.
mm,
So if I woke up feeling kind of bummed out, or because this is my reality right now,
mm,
um, I literally would, okay, that's for and Felon Christ, I feel like there was something, I think maybe Allison, her name, we called her Allison, she might have said a lot like observe without judgment,
mm,
just see how you are. And I always say that in my classes, like when I teach, it's like,
mm,
okay, just move and observe without, trying to anticipate or judge or criticize what you're doing. Just listen to what you're doing. Okay.
mm,
And so sometimes I can listen to my mind just being like judgy, that hurts, that hurts, that hurts. I keep
mm,
feeling that. That's what I'm feeling right now. And Feldenkrais put me in this state of where, okay, what can I, that's there. That I'm seeing you. I see you. Can I stop judging you? But maybe I'm still gonna keep doing that because that's just such a loud signal. Maybe it'll pass at some point. And if you get
mm,
in the state of like where you are moving in a way that is pleasurable,
mm,
like, because it's so interesting, it's like to move with I like to say this, like Larry says this a lot, was the most inclusive attention, not
mm,
like, how can you be more inclusive of the way you move? And when you're more inclusive about the rest of you, the pain just really gets, that signal stops being the most important thing.
mm,
And that happens at the emotional level, the mental level, the physical level. It just like all those volumes start coming down. It's just like, oh man, that probably fight or flight sort of state that you're in,
mm,
which is over to from sympathetic to parasympathetic. And it's just like, oh God, I can breathe deeper. And now when that breath is deeper, it's just like, God, that helps everything.
yeah,
It's just like it takes some time to sometimes climb back out of that, to
yeah.
climb out of the, uh, you know,
The
hole,
difficulty, yeah, yeah,
the difficulty, the challenge
yeah,
of like feeling not enough. Sometimes it's not enough
yeah,
because you have a disability, or
yeah.
it feels like not enough because you're not how you were before.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Or like hard done by, or like, the lot that you have, or yeah, all of those kind of emotions. Yeah,
yes,
I'm particularly impressed by that, what feels to me like a mindset of, willingness to go into the difficulty with a quality of, I mean, you mentioned pleasurableness, but it's kind of curiosity, like, what is this, and can I not, can it not control me, or define me, or something? I don't know if I'm
right.
saying it in the way that it makes sense to you, but that's kind of what I'm hearing from you in some way.
Yes, yes, yeah. Well stated.
Mm,
I think also, yeah, I mean, the universal law of like things are always changing. That always helped me too.
yeah,
Like, I mean, it's just that idea alone, just like brings change. Like sometimes just this, like, okay, nothing's permanent.
mm,
Things eventually pass. I mean, gosh, for me, I still live in this like sometimes like if I get even slightly sick, my arm is just like a big reminder that you are there, because I have like chronic pain.
yeah,
I could show you that I have a disability. My hand
yeah,
doesn't work. So I wear a wrap because I need compression
yeah,
and warmth on this. I discovered this like probably like way too late, like 7 years into my accident.
yeah,
And because it's like a barometer, I'll change anything kind of triggers it. But
yeah,
the worst is when I get sick. COVID kind of freaked me out because I was like, man, if I get COVID, actually my arm's gonna be the worst thing.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and
Interesting.
so I still like, if that my arm is a room gives me like, okay, and it can put me in this like why? I can
Yeah,
laugh about it just because you go there, it's like, why? And then I come out of it, I'm like, oh, I'm okay.
yeah. It's like being
I
re-traumatized,
can,
isn't it? Yeah, mm,
yeah, I get re-traumatized and then I'm okay. And I can, you still move forward. Like
yeah,
there's still, I learn from that still, you know?
mm,
And
mm,
that the place like this, like, I think that's what is the biggest part of this work for me is just like this joy from learning. Like
mm,
learning is the best thing. Like
yeah,
it's so great to learn. And whether it's like a tiny, this like tiny like revelation of like, scoot, oh, it's like so exciting and my because it's experiential learning.
yeah,
Experiential learning is just my favorite way to learn,
yeah,
and movement for me is super, you know,
yeah,
where I am learning it in the experience, and so
mm,
that's why I feel that that's so precious to me from what I've learned from Feldenkrais. Is just like, gosh, there's
yeah,
because you call it education. This is education. It's just like the body has so many resources for learning. It's like
yeah,
endless.
yeah,
Like and like the thing is like those limitations from your if you have a setback, you feel like the world gets so small.
mm,
And so it's just like, okay, so the world's small right now. How can I learn with, okay, I'm just gonna learn in here.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
if you go deeper and deeper, it's actually, it starts like, oh my gosh, that's a whole little universe in there.
yeah,
Whoa. And
yeah,
then like, and if you get into that state of like, oh, that's a universe, like you're, I don't know, somehow this like everything opens up again,
yeah,
and it's just like, oh, I can breathe again, it's like
yeah,
learning. Oh, it's just,
yeah,
it's magic. That's why I just doing this for so long, that magic is easy to, it's just easy to get blown away because I find like there's just magic in all of this work. So
yeah. And I think that that's for me a like I don't know, like a particularly interesting or important point, because the thing that we're talking about is pain or difficulty, so that you can find magic within pain is like, I think it's like it's quite a wonderful thing. It's like a some to be able to provide that for yourself, where you mentioned it, you've just had an accident and you've got 8 ribs broken, but you're able to find a way of bringing your attention to yourself and finding some magic within that experience that helped you deal with it in the moment.
yeah.
um and I think that that's um that's a really interesting thing to be able to do. um
Yeah, because you're forced. I mean, the thing is, like, I felt like I had no choice. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
that's what most people say. It's like, well, I have no choice. I have to do something.
Mm,
I, but I felt like I was lucky because I had tools at that point. But it was
yeah,
just like, oh, I have to use these tools again. That was what the part that I had to like overcome. It's just like, oh, I went through so much already. I have
yeah,
to do this again. It had
yeah,
way worse. This is way worse now. But I mean, that was just that first initial shock, and then it was just like, oh man, yeah, it's just like to find, I just how to dig deeper is just like the biggest thing. Is just like how it's hard
mm,
to do that, but at the same time, I was like, wow, I was forced to do that, and you have no other choice but to dig,
yeah,
go
yeah.
deeper.
and
And
and that,
yeah, that's the work though. It's like Feldenkrais
mm,
gave me like these things to help me
yeah, yeah.
dig deeper. Yeah.
So I mean, you mentioned it a second ago, but so that you still experience some difficulty with your arm now to this point,
Mhm.
but kind of where are you now with your integration of this injury in your life? Like,
That's a great
does
question.
it have a different meaning to you now in some way?
Yes, indeed. I mean, the thing is, because of all of that time with exploration and recovery, and now I'm in this place of vitality.
Yeah.
Um, I just am able to just be so creative, like this, like creative way of like I don't
Mm,
know. For me, and altruism for me is creativity,
Hmm.
because I'm an artist and I have a unique way of moving because I do have a disability, and so I am, well, sometimes, you know, I do miss like my arm or my hand, I miss like being able to uh, do some kind of cool, but at the same time, it's like, no, but because it's the body is a resource of how infinite you can infinite ways of how you can move. Me
Hmm.
as an artist, as a choreographer, I feel like I keep getting more, gathering vitality because
Hmm.
of this curiosity of moving in dance.
Yeah.
And actually in everything, it's just like sometimes I'm still like, oh my gosh, I can unload this dishwasher this way. I can, because fellow Christ people are just like curious all the time, right? Like
Yeah.
Larry says, I think he says this. Fellow Christ people never get bored because they can always play with themselves.
Yeah.
And so, like through dance and through fellow Christ, like I feel
Mm.
like I keep getting stronger, like mentally
Yeah.
and emotionally, because I feel like I gather life from
Yeah.
anyways, like the moving, just from,
Mm.
having the energy now to move, having in
Yeah.
many ways now with like even vigor, a lot of vigor, because like I feel like I can safely move myself in very strong ways that
Yeah. Which is a
have, and
signifier of coming out of um,
yeah,
the traumatic experience.
exactly.
That you've got that
Yeah,
resilience now to be able to almost test it in some way. It's like
exactly.
you've come
Yes.
out of the difficulty into something new. Yeah.
Yes. To where it's like, yeah, now I can play with boundaries and limitations a little bit
Exactly.
more,
Yeah.
but still with like, I mean, there's like, okay, I won't be doing handsprings.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, but at the same time, there's like, I can climb mountains, and I'm
Yeah.
backpacking, and I'm able to do full length dance shows now, and I
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
take dance class without feeling like I am. I mean, I'll feel muscularly sore, but
Yeah.
I won't feel as much like, in the past, I would like every joint would hurt, or in the
Mm.
past, like I would have way too much like, um, I mean, where it would take several days for me to, I mean, gosh, soreness still happens, but like I'm saying, like
Mm.
joints where I'm like, I don't know if I should be doing this anymore, because
Yeah.
those were the things I had to say to myself before.
Mm.
But now, yeah, the resilience, the like just natural strength that I can keep building on top of
Yeah.
from all of that, because there's just more of myself, even though there's some of me missing still.
Yeah.
Well, I call that missing, but not really. I mean, it
Yeah. I mean,
still
it to me, it
can
doesn't
be.
sound it doesn't sound at this point that and I don't know if this is an appropriate word anymore, but it doesn't sound like that's a disability anymore in some way. That there
Yeah,
is restriction in what you can do with your left arm, but it doesn't sound like a disability anymore. Um,
I
yeah.
yeah. I mean, because people see me as a normal person generally, and then they
Mm.
realize they hand me something, and I'm holding something in my right hand. They hand me something, I'm like,
Yeah.
I can't. Okay, and so I'll be
Mm.
carrying something, because usually I will hold something against my body with my
Yeah.
arm,
Yeah.
like for instance, I'll have to do this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so if somebody hands me something, they're like, "Oh yeah," and they've
Yeah.
known me for 10 years. It's just because they're
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, I forget that about you," because
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I
But it
exist
doesn't.
in life.
Yeah. But it
I
doesn't
exist.
doesn't
Yeah,
feel that it restricts you. Doesn't
yeah.
feel restrictive in some way.
Yeah, it really was like this, lemons became lemonade, and I
Lemonade.
just feel super,
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like, that experience helps me also, telling that story helps inspire people to be like, okay, I'll put it in this work, even though it feels like I'm doing nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because Feldenkrais, to start. it feels
Yeah.
like nothing, right?
Yeah,
But it's
that was going to be
yeah.
my next question is, maybe for someone that doesn't have Feldenkrais as a resource, or
Mhm.
dance as a background and a resource, like what advice or what guidance would you, or what could you say that would be useful to people that are going through traumatic experience that isn't necessarily within the physical component as well? Like, I feel like some of this stuff is transferable, that there's something about traumatic experience which is encompasses lots of different elements of life, and I feel like how you dealt with what you dealt with was a really nice way of dealing with your traumatic experience. So I don't know if you've got anything that applies to a kind of wider category of that.
Yeah, I feel like my first instinct to answer that or to share with people when I
Mm,
first meet them is
mm,
that the subtle world, the subtle world is like that's where there's so much resource. There the
mm,
subtle world of slowing down and paying attention and feeling sensations within the sensations.
mm,
There's there's sensations. And then if you like really you really go, there's then there's like a whole world in there,
mm.
there's so much in there that's so fun
Yeah. Mm,
that you can learn so much from that will bring so much joy in your process, like
mm,
because
mm.
the discovery, curiosity, exploration, and those are still in you that may not feel like that they're there
Yeah.
because the subtle man, it's just like there's so much underneath us that we can
Yeah.
look, see,
Yeah.
and observe. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. And you said
um
something similar to that earlier in terms of, if only this is available, then working within this, um, and finding how then this can create space just by, the phrase you used was non-judgmental attention, or observing without judgment
yes.
within whatever experience you're having. So yeah, that's really, really great. I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to say to people, just to kind of open it up to you.
I feel like you asked some amazing questions, so yeah, thank you. I feel like saying yay Feldenkrais. I mean, or yay movement, yay,
Mm,
I feel like, gosh, it's I feel like even if you're not a mover, oh my gosh, you'll love movement. It just
yeah.
helps you learn how to love movement, even if it's the way you make it. That's the best.
Mm,
It's not what you think it should be
yeah.
from
Yeah.
culture, from athletes, from TikTok, everything like that make, or
Mm,
what do you call it, yoga, the yoga crazy, it's just
yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Let all of that external stuff go, and movement in the internal is just, it's just like,
Mm.
yeah,
A magical world.
it's a magical world.
Mm,
Yes,
yeah.
thank you.
Great. Okay. Well, yeah, I think that's great, and we're going to wrap up. So thank you so much, Lisa, for coming on. It's been a joy to talk to you about this. It's a really important subject, and I think that we've got into some interesting territory. So thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about this.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Great.